Marc Márquez is once again the center of attention in the MotoGP world. This time, however, it's not just for his prowess on the track. It's also for a reckless act that goes against his own principles. He made a risky decision on a track that once ruined his career, but he did it for something greater than mere points. Here's the full story behind Marquez's biggest transgression of the 2025 season. What's the real reason behind Marquez's reckless action against his principles? Let's discuss it. 2 years ago, the Sachsenring was a nightmare for Marquez. A circuit he had conquered for over a decade transformed into a trap that nearly ended everything. During that dismal weekend, Marquez crashed 5 times, including a brutal high-side during warm-up, which forced him to retire from the race. The world watched in horror as Marquez limped out of the Honda paddock, his body shattered and his spirit in tatters. His relationship with Honda was at its lowest point. "I think he's finished," said former world champion and TNT Sports commentator Neil Hodgson. He risked everything on a bike that couldn't deliver. That was the turning point. Marquez decided to leave his multi-million-dollar contract with Honda and join the satellite Gresini Ducati team in 2024. A miracle happened. His smile returned, the crashes stopped, and his performance stabilized. He wasn't just competitive. Again, he had rediscovered his old self in 2025. Marc Márquez returns to the Sachsenring at his best. He is no longer a tortured and frustrated rider, but rather a world championship leader whose dominance is reminiscent of his most lethal era. 2019, riding the Ducati Desmosedici GP25, the most perfect bike on the grid, Marquez has won 9 of the 10 sprint races. He has a 68-point lead over his closest rival. However, he knows that his favorite circuits can also be a trap. He crashed in Austin and Jerez this season, 2 tracks where he usually excels. "I'm learning to control myself," Marquez said before the race. "I know I'm fast here, but the key is managing, not forcing." That's his new philosophy. Don't beat yourself up. Saturday at the Sachsenring had a somber atmosphere with gray skies, light rain, and bone-chilling low temperatures. The track was as slippery as a mirror, demanding caution rather than bravery. However, in MotoGP especially, when Marquez is involved, racing instinct often overpowers reason. Marc Márquez started the race from pole position, a perfect start that promised to continue his long-standing dominance on this circuit. However, everything fell apart in an instant. He had a poor start and ran wide at the first corner, dropping to 5th. At first, it looked like a major mistake, but it turned out to be no accident, but rather a very brave, conscious decision. Tires were cold, and the bike was sliding and locking up, Marquez explained. "So, I chose to go off the track rather than crash," Marquez said calmly. He was already prepared to accept a mediocre result, perhaps a 5th or 6th place finish. But the race wasn't over yet. As tire temperatures began to rise, something within Marquez awakened. A rhythm set in, and instinct took over. The rider, who had been restrained and barely aggressive at first, suddenly began to stir. Marquez began to overtake his rivals one by one with his trademark style of clinical aggression, flawless precision, and unwavering confidence. Fabio Quartararo, Di Giannantonio, and Marco Bezzecchi all witnessed the king of the Sachsenring's unstoppable advance. What initially seemed like a mediocre race turned into a stage for a comeback. His promise to be careful and not push himself was finally broken. When instinct took over, Marquez returned to his purest self, a rider who lives to fight. No matter how dangerous the track ahead, Marco Bezzecchi, the Aprilia rider who had been outstanding since the start, took a commanding lead. In Sector 3, he seemed untouchable, demonstrating incredible grip and precision in every corner and maintaining a near-perfect racing rhythm. It looked like it would be his first sprint victory and the big moment he had long awaited. However, one thing could never be calculated in racing strategy: the will of a champion. Marc Márquez was closing in. His fastest time, 1 minute 29 seconds and 4 milliseconds, was more than just a number. It was a warning sign. It was a mental alarm for Bezzecchi. The pressure was mounting. "Second place is enough," Marquez admitted calmly. It was a rational statement, considering the track conditions, the risk of injury, and his long-term goals. But then he confessed something deeper, more personal. "It was my boss's birthday. It wasn't about the points. It wasn't about the championship. It was about a gift. It was an emotional gift that only those who have fought with both their brains and their hearts could understand. That day, Marquez decided to break his own principles. "Sometimes you race with your heart, not your head," he said honestly. On lap Shursif, Marquez clocked a 1 minute 28 seconds and 9 milliseconds, the fastest time of the entire race. All eyes were on him. Bezzecchi was beginning to lose the lead. On lap 15, Marquez pulled off an incredible maneuver, slipping up the inside and overtaking Bezzecchi with precision and impeccable courage. Marco Bezzecchi settled for second place, but showed no disappointment. "I knew he would come," he said. "He was very fast in Sector 3. I tried, but it wasn't enough," he said realistically, yet proudly. Despite failing to secure his first sprint victory, Bezzecchi's performance was impressive. He was consistent throughout the race and established himself as a serious contender this season. With this result, Bezzecchi now trails Franco Morbidelli in the standings by just 9 points. Unfortunately, his compatriot suffered a heavy crash and required further medical examination. Fighting with Marc Itzel is a learning experience. He knows when to attack and how to pressure his opponents without leaving any gaps. "Even though I lost, I'm happy to be at that level," Bezzecchi added, showing his respect for the champion and confidence in his own potential. With his victory at the Sachsenring, Marquez became the first MotoGP rider to win 10 sprint races in a single season. Moreover, he has finished in the top 2 in all of them so far. Domination isn't just about skill, it's also about system. "Last year, Saturday was my weakness. Now, it's my strength," said Marquez. "I worked a lot over the winter. This GP25 is completely different." The Ducati GP25 is known for its stability under braking, agility in corners, and tire-friendly nature. However, it wasn't the bike that overcame the fear. It was the rider's determination. The 2025 Sachsenring will be remembered not for the fastest lap, not for Marc Márquez's 10th victory, and not for Marco Bezzecchi nearly making history. It will be remembered for one reckless moment, one high-stakes decision made by Marc Márquez. It was a violation of his own principles and the rules he had held dear as his moral compass. This time, however, he chose to deviate. Surprisingly, he succeeded. He escaped. Marquez is no fool, though. He knows that luck is a currency that cannot be used twice to buy safety. This time, it worked. But what about next time? Who knows? He said with a faint smile, not only a smile of relief, but also of a million risks. It was a smile from a man who knows he has danced on the edge of a cliff and still stands tall. MotoGP is a grand but cruel stage. It doesn't always forgive. It doesn't always give second chances. In a world of calculations and numbers, Marquez proved that victory sometimes comes from a deeper place, from guts, intuition, and a long history of pain and triumph. Did Marquez's actions at the Sachsenring reflect a change in character or reveal his true colors? Let us know your thoughts below.